Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Writers Chat. We're so glad that you're with us today. We are a wonderful community, I think. Not that I'm at all biased, but we are where craft and community meet together, and we are just very excited to have you with us. My name is Johnny Alexander. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Melissa Stroh and Brandy Bro, and a very special guest, Julie Payne. I want to tell you all about her. She's been a Christian writer and speaker since 2019. She served as president of Word Weavers Orlando for 3 years, and she currently mentors other chapter presidents. Since 2018, she has coordinated the Florida Tapestry Awards Writing Contest. So if you're ready to be equipped on how to judge contests, you're in the right place. Please welcome Julie. Julie and I met, this is the first time we've met like in person, but via email when she first asked me to be a judge, which may have been back in 2018. Not sure. The first year I judged the Florida Tapestry contest, but and sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. But even when I say, Julie, I can't do it this year, keep me on the list, she will ask me again. So I try to do at least 3 or 4 entries a year. I don't always make it, but I really enjoyed working with her and was really then excited to bring her on to talk about judging contests, how we can all do that, how we can be good judges, and probably learn some tips on being good entries too. We'll just say it like that. All right, Julie, take it away.
Well, great. Well, thank you, Johnny, for that introduction. I'm excited to be here. Yes, I do coordinate the Florida Tapestry Writing Contest Awards. This has been going on forever, and I've only been with Word Weavers. That's how I got even into writing since I want to say 2019, 2000. No, I'm sorry, 18, whatever. When I published my book, I have a book that I wrote, a book in Bible study. But uh, I've learned a lot about judging. I'm not an editor. I'm not a agent. I'm not a publisher. I'm just one who loves the Lord, and I write for Him. And I've learned a lot through Word Weavers International here at the Orlando chapter. And so I've kind of saturated myself into the Florida Tapestry Awards market. And yes, we do keep our judges on file. We ask them every year if they'd like to judge again. We give them the opportunity to say yes or no. And people are always referred to me from other judges. So let's see. With that being said, I do have a PowerPoint I'm going to share with you guys. Okay, feel free to take any pictures of any of the points if you'd like. Um, and if you have any questions, yeah, just either put it in the chat or however you guys deal with that. I'll be happy to answer questions along the way so we can talk on point.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. Okay, so how to write to judge a writer's contest. It's all about fairness and excellence. So that's really what you're looking for when you are judging. Now, actually, the question was brought up, what is a judge looking for when I enter a writing contest? So you can take these things and turn them around, and you will learn what a judge is looking for while I'm going through my little PowerPoint here. So I've put it into two different sections. Section one is judging a writing contest technically, what they are looking for technically. Section two will be tips and tricks that I've learned along the way and things that the judge will look for that really aren't in writing. And so that will help you be a better person who's going to enter a contest. All right, let's see if I can get this to move. So things that we're going to talk about in this section is what makes a contest worthwhile, the purpose of contests, the preparation to be a judge, evaluation, so how you evaluate the writing, understanding the judging criteria. There's always criteria that the judge will receive from each of the competition because different competitions look for different things. Or they have guidelines for certain things and how it needs to be written. And you need to be the one who says, oh, you wrote a poetry, but you didn't do it single line space. That all gets deducted from points in judging. Providing feedback, I'm going to show you how you need to do that. Common judging pitfalls, challenges and solutions, how we handle problems, finalizing your results, and things that you may not know that are behind the scenes. Any questions on any of that? Or are you all ready to get started on it?
I think we're ready to go. Yeah.
Okay, so what makes a writer's contest worthwhile? Judging a writer's contest is not just about selecting the winners, it's about fostering creativity, upholding standards, and offering constructive evaluation. That's really what we're looking for when we have a judge. I explained to you someone a little bit earlier, if I find I have a judge that just scores all fives because they don't have the time to really score, or they don't take the time to give notes to a person entering the competition, I really kind of write that judge off because I'm looking for people who are willing to give constructive, helpful criticism so that person can grow in their craft. Behind every great writing contest is a thoughtful judge who knows the goal, whether they're going to express inspiration, recognition, or go on to publishing. They know the categories because they can choose which category they want to judge. So I would say if you are judging fiction and you really don't know nonfiction very well, then you'd say, I don't want to judge nonfiction. You know who the audience is. So usually in the description of the paragraphs, when people submit their entries, they give a little description, not all the time, but that's information you may know who the audience is and if they're writing for that specific audience. And then you always have to consider the genre, expectations, and age appropriateness. Understanding the purpose. So why do contests exist? They exist so that we encourage, we recognize others, and they grow in their craft. I've heard of many people who enter contests and the judge was so critical that they never wrote again. And I'm sure you've heard of people like that too. So the word weaver method that they use is called the sandwich method. We always give a compliment, give a critique, and give a compliment. So judges need to always make sure that they compliment. You can't just give feedback that criticizes the work. The judge's role is to be an evaluator and an encourager. And they need to balance objectivity with constructive feedback. So you can't have bias in it. You just need to give constructive feedback on what the person wrote. They need to celebrate that talent. They recognize and reward writers' creativity and their efforts, encourage growth. They provide guidance to help the writers improve. That's really the main goal. If you come across a piece that's like, wow, this is a 10 out of 10, there's really not a lot you're going to give to encourage them to be better in their craft. But just them knowing that, wow, what a great piece this was, that will always help the writer. The purpose is to maintain integrity, to ensure a transparent, fair, and unbiased judging process. A lot of times it's hard to be unbiased because your personality, just like when you're editing something or critiquing something, your personality comes out. Well, I didn't like that, so they could have said it this way. So you just have to be careful it's not any bias that you have. And then we need to reflect the contest goals. So we align judging with the specific goals of the contest. Some want to highlight emerging talents. They give awards for originality and that kind of thing. So you would want to put those things in notes that you would write to the author. So to prepare for the role, you need to understand the contest rules. You always get these ahead of time. I actually include them on my rubric. These are the guidelines for what this category needs. They would include the genre, the word count, themes, formatting, deadlines, that kind of thing. And you need to be familiar with all the judging criteria as to whether we're looking for originality, structure, grammar, emotional impact. I do want to say here, sometimes some of this seems a little overwhelming, and somebody might say, I'm not going to judge. It sounds like too much work. And when we have judges do our Florida Tapestry Awards entries, it's a volunteer basis. So usually the people we have who judge are people that really want to encourage writers in their writing and to help them be better in their writing. So just remember, it's not really a lot of rules, but you do need to follow these things so that the guidelines are all followed and that it is structured to a degree, uh, but people need to be called out. We are working toward getting them ready to publish their manuscripts. And so if they didn't do it in Times New Roman 12 font, and that's a guideline, you need to call them out on that. Can't let them get away, or formatting's wrong. They have to be in the formatting that the publisher is going to want. We need to set all our personal biases aside. We focus on the work, not the personal preference or external factors. And you need to carefully organize your time. When I send out my note, I say, how many do you think you can judge? Some people will say, hey, I can do 15. Some might say I can fit 2 in. So you need to know what's on your schedule and what you think you can fit into your schedule. One of the hardest things I have is when a judge didn't respond to me and acknowledge, hey, I've got these 6 that you sent me that I told you I would do. And it's a week before entries need to be returned, the rubrics need to be returned. And I'm like emailing this judge, hey, did you get my stuff? And I don't even know if they got it. And then I'm going to be scrambling, having to find another judge to do these ones if they don't respond to me inevitably. Does anybody have any questions up till now? Am I talking too fast?
No, you're doing great.
Okay.
But Melissa did point out in the chat that not everyone may know what a rubric is.
Oh, okay. We are going to cover rubrics. That is
Okay.
the form that we use for judging.
Okay.
So honestly, I assume every writing contest would have their own. Ours were created for us. So when we get to that, it'll be coming up shortly.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
you'll see what that is. Thank you for the question.
Yeah.
The evaluation process. So you have the initial review that you should do. You should skim over the entry, and our entries are no more than 1,500 words from their manuscript.
Right, yeah.
So if it's a big, long book length fiction book, they have to give you a synopsis, which is a 1-page synopsis. So you at least know what's going to happen in the story. But you only get up to 1,500 words. That's the max that they would submit. So you're going to skim the entry. You're going to then do a detailed reading, and you can note, things on your detailed reading. Take notes. This will help you understand about the plot, the character, the tone, and those kind of elements. And then you want to assess against the criteria. So you want to make sure, again, you know the guidelines because you need to call out anything that is not done according to guidelines. And understanding the judging criterion rubrics, you have to understand that the purpose of the rubric, which is the judging, that's going to come up next. So it's what we allow the judges to use to score the manuscript. The rubric ensures consistent and objective evaluation. So we have questions on ours that you can think about. How well did they do with this? And common criteria that is on rubrics are these 6 things here. So the creativity and originality, clarity and coherence, the structure, plot, organization of the writing, grammar and mechanics, the emotional impact of the writing, and the adherence to the theme. Any questions on that before we get into a rubric?
No, I think we're
Okay.
good.
Okay. So here's a sample poetry rubric, part 1, because I had to split it into 2. It was too long. So at the beginning, at the top, we have where you score this on a 1 to 5 scale. And I actually am praying about changing it to a 1 to 10 scale, but where 1 is is not ready to publish. 5 is ready to publish. So you have to have your score come somewhere in between. And then I say, please leave the author comments indicating why your score and or how they could strengthen and better their craft. So one of the first category is the overall impact. Does the poem encourage the reader to view the topic or theme in a new way? Does the poem evoke emotion? Does the poem feel distinctive? And is tension used effectively? So every one of the rubrics for a specific genre is going to have specific questions for that genre that are all geared toward making that manuscript, that piece, that poem, that whatever be better. Okay? The second element in a poetry rubric is the poetic elements. Are rhetorical devices used, such as rhyme, alliteration, onomatopoeia, are they used effectively? Are word choices vivid and precise? Does the author avoid abstract emotional labels? Now, let me say here, I have judges that follow these questions to the T. I didn't put everything in here because you don't have to really follow these questions, but you do need to comment on the category, which is like overall impact, poetic elements. We just give these questions to kind of help them understand what we're looking for. Okay, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So we continue on with voice. Does the voice keep the reader engaged? Is the author's approach fresh? Are figurative language and metaphor used to evoke mood and emotion? Structure. Is the form of the poem appropriate to the subject and the theme? Does the author adhere to requirements of the chosen form? Mechanics. Is the manuscript free of errors in punctuation, usage, grammar, and spelling? Have sentences and stanzas been polished to avoid awkwardness? So there's, I think there was only 6 questions or 5 questions. I don't know. In poetry, there's not very many questions. We have them submit a 1-page, single space line poem. And then you just add up your scores and you end up with a total score. Okay. Anybody have questions on the rubric?
I don't see anything. Oh, well, let me.
You want me to go back or?
No, you're good. I was skimming through the chat and David wrote, I see things like, does the author avoid abstract emotional labels and start wondering if I could use them and make it work to be beautiful? That's more of a comment. So yeah, sure don't tell, someone said, Brandy said to David. Yeah.
Yes, they can definitely give if they're not seeing something done or seeing something done that could be done better. Sure, they could give examples. I'll tell you, I had somebody, a judge once, who said, "This is the most perfect poem I've ever read, technically. The information that the poem included, the person didn't agree with at all." It was very strange. And this judge made a comment that although I don't agree with the information in this, because it was kind of it was something that touched on poetic theology, let's say. It had theological stuff in it, and the person didn't agree with the theological. Um, but he scored it a perfect score because it was grammatically and mechanically and technically a perfect poem. But he kept his bias out of it, although he did note it in the notes because somebody might not like what you wrote here. And I'm just telling you that I don't agree with it. I just want you to know that, but I'm not deducting score from you. So, yes, Tom, is that Tom who said that?
David said
David?
that. Thank you.
Yeah. So if you have something that you want to let them know, you can surely write it in the comments, although it may not be something that they know. It's something that they may need to improve on. Or if you have an example, it would be a good thing to show. Okay, so when you're providing feedback, you can do additional edits. So we always give constructive feedback. So you focus on their strengths before pointing out areas of improvement. We always start with something positive. You need to be specific. So instead of saying, this needs work, you can try and say, the dialogue could feel more authentic if the characters spoke in shorter sentences.
Mm.
So you give them an idea of what they can change. Or consider strengthening the ending by whatever. You want to encourage growth and highlight potential for future development. You want to be fair and balanced. Judge the piece as it is, not what you want it to be. And avoid penalizing for style preferences. And this again goes with the bias or whatever. It's not my style. Oh, this didn't work for me. You need to do it more like, oh, well, I said, unless it breaks the rules. You need to say something like, your piece has such a vivid setting. I felt like I was there. You might consider simplifying some of the dialogue to make emotional tension. Okay, so you always give a compliment with the critique. And a good thing is always to compare later entries that you receive only to the rubric. By the time you've judged 5, 10, whatever, you might start judging and saying, oh man, I really like that other one. This one doesn't compare at all to that other one. And then you're giving them a lower score because the other one was so good. And you're kind of picking out your number one already. You don't want to do that. You want to compare all the entries to the rubric. How did they do when you answer those questions?
I
Okay.
think that's one of the most difficult and yet kind of fun things about judging, especially when you're only doing like four or five. And you really, I mean, you do often come up with one or two that are just so superior. And it really is hard. I mean, you just have to like, nope, you do it. And I mean I do. You follow the rubric and you give the scores, but then you start like, oh, looking at those scores, like, oh, these are, so close. I kind of like this one better, but yeah, this one is what I judged better. So you have to keep it that way.
Yes, yes. Thank you for that input.
Yeah.
And it's very hard on my end. I think I do discuss this a little bit later, but you know, sometimes a judge will just really love it, and it usually happens a lot in the poems. It's like they
Uh,
love it and they score it a 5, which is the highest you can give, a 5. And I'm changing the rules. I used to say, if you give a less than a 5, please make a comment. But now I'm going to leave it where no matter what you score, please leave a comment. So
mm,
if you give a 5, then say what they really did that was good, why you gave them a perfect score. Because it amazes me where I might have a judge give a 3 on something and someone else gives a 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. So, you
yeah,
know, um, it's hard to keep bias out of it, but we
it
do
is.
try.
I'm just going to read one more comment. Kathy says that she has the time when she's judging. She tries to read them at different times so she doesn't compare because then they're not so close together in her head. So
Yes, very good.
that's a good tip.
Yes. And I've had judges that say, in their schedule, they'll set aside, that's why if they say to me, I can do 10, they'll set aside 2 weeks and they'll just do one a day
Yeah,
and give a little extra room so that they're not reading all 10 in the same day.
yeah.
And I can kind of tell the judges who do that because the judging kind of reflects. But like I said, I really kind of weed out people that I don't tell them that. Oh no. But because you want a fair competition.
Absolutely.
All right, so common judging pitfalls. We need to watch out for letting mechanics overshadow the meaning. Okay. You can be so like focused on the mechanics of something that you lose the fact of what they wrote and the beauty of something they wrote. So you really have to balance that. You have to watch out for being swayed by one impressive line. That could make your whole judging be biased. And then you're like, oh, that was great. Excuse me. Watch out for overvaluing vocabulary over the clarity. So you could really get caught up in someone who has a beautiful voice and just says things so beautifully that it loses the clarity of what is trying to be said. Because there are other, boy, sorry,
No, you're
and I didn't bring a water over here. I'll be okay in a minute. There are times that people say things so eloquently, but you kind of go, what did they really say? Have
yeah,
you ever had that happen to you?
yeah,
The words are so beautiful, but what does that really mean? So we need to also watch out for judging a draft as if it was the polished final version. These are not. A lot of them are the first time they've ever entered a competition. We do need to focus on effectiveness, not the perfection of something. And we need to consider the intent that is behind the piece. Okay? Any questions?
I
Well,
don't
I have
see
a comment.
anything.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a comment, and that's that, different contests have different focuses for what they're looking
Yes.
for.
Yes.
So, these things to watch out for and things to do might be a little bit different for different contests. Say, for example, there's a contest for editorial excellence. In that case, they are specifically looking for excellence in mechanics. And things like
Yes.
that, in addition to content. So it really depends upon each particular contest and each particular way it's set up and what they're looking for.
Thank you for bringing that up. And that is so true. And I am actually probably bringing you this from a biased point of view because we're not an editing competition. So thank you for that comment. Challenges and solutions. These are some things that happen behind the scenes. Sometimes there's an overwhelming number of entries. I tell you, I thank God for judges who I email after they've finished their limit. And I say, oh, one of my judges had an emergency and they can't judge the 6 that I gave them. Are you able to take any more? Um, oh, we really had way more entries than we usually do because I have a certain number of judges you have to remember, each entry goes to a minimum of 3 judges.
Yeah.
So if I have 75 entries, give or take, I send out, what is that, 225 emails just to send them out and get them judged. So sometimes there is an overwhelming number of entries. Personal biases, we've talked about that. So that is something you have to remind yourself as a judge to base it on the criteria and not your preference. And then we don't always, but often we have tiebreakers that we need. So I will send entries out again to judges that haven't judged it, just so I can have a tiebreaker
Mm.
on some things. And then finalizing your results, we review top scoring entries and confirm their alignment with the contest goals. You have to document your decision clearly and then submit the results. So I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but before we started this recording, if I have 3 judges and somebody scores a 50 and somebody scores a 48 and somebody scores a 19, I have to look at that 3rd judge and say, what's their problem? I will inevitably always send it out to another judge
Mm.
just to see what they're saying. I will also read their comments. I will also look at, did they judge something that they really weren't qualified to judge? Did they offer to do this, but they don't normally do fiction when this is a fiction, So I kind of look at all those different things. So when you are offering to be a judge, you need to make sure you clearly define what you can judge and how many you want to judge, what your time schedule looks like. Some more things that you may not know behind the scenes. Interesting. As a judge, you may have entered the same contest. Judges are allowed to enter the contest, but they cannot judge a category that they have entered. So it's very clear that that's how we do that. As a judge, you might agree to score 3 entries and end up with 5 or more. So just really try to be careful and tell us how many you can judge. But when you get that email that says, oh no, I need another judge, can you help? Just be honest. And if you can, you can. If you can't, you can't. We don't want you being a judge who is stressed because, oh, okay, I'll take those 3 more, but how am I going to fit this in my schedule? Or am I really going to do this? And then you don't give it a fair evaluation.
Yeah.
And then as a judge, as a judge, agree to judge categories that you are trained to give feedback on. We've kind of touched on this. You really want to do things that you're familiar with. There's some people say, I don't do poetry at all, so I don't ever send them poetry, so you want to do what you're familiar with judging or with writing even. Okay, any questions?
I don't think so. Did I miss anything? We've got a lot of comments going on, but I don't think there were actually questions. You're doing a
Okay.
great job.
Oh, well, good. If there's any comments worth saying, feel free.
Well, there were comments about the bias, like yes, about like I just skipped it. Kathy commented that she edits for a theologian who ideas she doesn't necessarily agree with, but he's a good and prolific writer. So, you still have to just edit that as best you can. And let me see what else. Oh, Christine, who this is from a teaching point of view, so this doesn't really help with judging, but it's an interesting comment. Said that with her middle schoolers who are homeschooled, the writing levels are varied. And so she tries to see previous writing and current writing and do that, which of course we can't do with judging because it's all anonymous, but it's a
Right.
good idea for teachers. So there we go.
Yeah, good. Okay, this is the second section, Judging a Writer's Contest Tips and Tricks, I call it. We're going to talk about why judging matters, the judge's responsibility, reading the rules, sample judging. Oh, never mind, I took that out. Reading and first impressions, scoring tips, giving feedback, avoiding bias, final thoughts, and then we'll have some question and answers. Okay, so why judging matters. Judging contests aren't just about winning, it's shaping the writer's growth, credibility, confidence, and finding their voice. Judges help to uphold the standards in the competition. A fair process builds trust in the contest and the organizers. I'm going to stop and tell a quick little story here. I had a woman who, oh, I shouldn't have said woman. Oh, well.
Too
I
late.
had someone who entered a contest who emailed me and said, I can't believe the judges all scored me low. She said, I've entered this document last year, which they're allowed to do if it didn't win first place. They're allowed to do it 2 years in a row. And I had higher scores last year. She was not a happy camper. And I told her, well, we always send for one category, I try and send the same things out to the same judges. That's what I try to do, so that all 3 judges are judging not just yours, but the same other person who entered whatever,
Oh.
short nonfiction, let's say. I even went back and looked. She didn't enter last year. So I don't know what she was talking about because I looked to see if I found her document. Never found her document 5 years back at all. So I don't know what the story was with that, but we have to uphold standards and build trust that the contest is fair and unbiased. And I don't know, I'm a peacemaker and I really have a hard time when people complain about things, but we try to uphold those standards. And as a judge, your role is part critic, part cheerleader, part teacher, and by promoting writing excellence, providing constructive feedback, recognizing emerging talent, and refining the writer's craft. So that's what is most important about contests. The judge's responsibility is that they need to be fair and impartial. It's not about personal preference. Some of this might sound duplicated from the technical part, but it's important. We need to be consistent in scoring, and you need to give each writer equal consideration. Be constructive in your comments and treat each entry with respect. There are some judges that might, I don't know. I don't really keep judges that talk negatively and don't put a good comment with it. Because that's the worst thing, even with Word Weavers International, where I go to their critique groups, the horror stories I've heard out of writer critique groups, how they're so mean and so demeaning. You don't want to be that way at all. You want to give constructive criticism with a happy note. You need to respect the writer's effort and voice. Reading the rules. This is really important. If a synopsis is supposed to be included, they need to be deducted if they didn't include it. If a paragraph is supposed to be included, they need to be deducted if it wasn't included. If it's not double spaced. So you need to know the rules. And there's not, each category has kind of like its own rules, but there are main rules. It's Times New Roman, 12 font, double spaced, 1-inch margins, those kind of things, because that's what publishers are requiring. So we try to keep it the rules that publishers want. So these people are prepared to submit to a publisher, but then there's specific guidelines for the genre that they're entering. So you do need to know the rules. I did not include it in my sample, but on my rubrics, I include what the guideline is for that rubric. So the judge, once again, has it in front of them, not on some other paper that they need to have read. You need to verify the word count. The genre and the theme restrictions, the format and submission guidelines, and any disqualification protocols. So if they've done something, or even if a judge, if a document sounds familiar, like I have had a judge say, oh, I judged this person last year. I could tell by the writing, this is the second in their series. So they knew who the author was because they knew at the end of the year who won what or whatever. So they disqualified themselves from judging that. So, you want to try to do that. Reading and first impressions. Resist the urge to judge early. Let the writing speak fully. Read each entry completely and let the work just sit without scoring it. And then you want to avoid any snap judgments and then go back and do a second reading because that often reveals more depth. So reread for better understanding and before your final tallying of the scores. That's the best way to do it. I don't know that all the judges do it, but that's what they should do. Scoring tips. Score each entry consistently using the rubric. You hear about that a lot, and that's why we use a rubric, to keep consistent standards. Take notes so you can defend and justify your score, and then narrow down top entries and re-rank. So if you have a lot that you're going, oh, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, you need to go back through them. And this is not like biased or whatever, but if I get all your entries and they all say 5, how am I going to pick a winner? It's going to be pretty hard to pick a winner. So if your entries are all pretty close, you really need to narrow it down and start picking some that are better. In giving feedback, you want to, again, begin with their strengths and praise. You want to offer at least 1 to 2 areas for improvement. If you do too many, the writer could be disillusioned. If you don't give enough, the writer could be disillusioned. Okay, so you want to be specific and actionable, maintain a respectful, kind, and clear tone, even if it is critical. And feedback should build, not break. Give writers something they can work on. Even writers that write really well benefit from something thoughtful. Avoiding bias. Everyone has bias. You need to acknowledge yours and you need to push past it. We use name blind judging. That's where you don't know who the judge is. They don't know who the writer is. It's all blind. Everyone's given a number and a letter, and the competition entry is given a document number. You need to be open and fair to all writing styles and genres. Well, I should say at least the ones that you pick that you can judge. But you need to honor a variety of voices and approaches to storytelling. Because even if you judge fiction, you're going to have writers that have different kind of voices. You need to recognize your personal preferences. So you need to make sure you recognize them and don't really use them. You can offer some of it in the feedback. I'm going to touch something in a minute. And you want to revisit entries to cross-check bias and double-check scoring fairness. Interestingly, some of you may know this, I don't know. I ran across a person who's writing some manuals, not on how to write, but on just things about life. And her and I got talking about readers and what kind of readers you have for different kind of books. So if you sat in a critique group, you know that you'll have someone say, oh, I didn't like the way this was, or I didn't understand what you were trying to say there, or I wish you to put more documentation of what you were trying to say here, or I wish you would have described it a little better. I wanted to have more of a word picture. So a lot of times we have our own reading style. And if I can remember what she told me, because this is impromptu here, she said something like, you have the readers who read for the story. You have readers who read for the knowledge. They want to learn something new from it. You have readers who read for the inspiration. And you have those readers who read really fast. So they read for the bullet points or the little insets on your page where they can kind of flip through and get the gist of what you're saying. So if you write a document that acknowledges all four of those readers, unbeknownst to the writer, they're going to have more readers want to read their writing. So if you only write like I like knowledge, man. When I write, I want to give you knowledge and say, this is what you can do to grow as a person. But in my book that I published, I had to include story, and I did. And that helps the people that like to hear story. I included bullet points and things that talk more. And I didn't even realize that in my writing, I addressed all four of those reader types. So when you recognize your personal preference, you might stop and realize, gosh, I'm a reader who really likes to hear the inspiration in what is written. There's no inspiration in this thing. I'm going to give it a lower score. You don't want to do that. You want to recognize not only your biases, but what kind of reading preference you might have. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good
Any
point.
questions on that?
I
Okay.
don't see any. No, I think we're good.
Okay. All right. So final thoughts. Judging is a gift. It's an honor and a duty that will impact a writer's journey. Writers appreciate your insights and they will grow through your feedback. You need to keep it fair, focused, and friendly. A thoughtful critique can change a career or offer encouragement to keep the writer writing. So I say, can you be a judge? Or can you be a writer? I don't know if you all learned anything about how you're going to submit your next entry to a writer's contest. I will take additional questions, but I do want to say, so I don't forget to, the Florida Tapestry Awards is always looking for additional judges. So if you think you can be a judge, you can email me at the Florida Tapestry Awards at gmail.com.
Right.
Does anybody have any questions?
We did have a question from Elaine who had to go, so I'm going to read it. She said,
Okay.
do you have any suggestions for a great contest for her to enter a memoir? She's been told by her graphic designer that she should enter her last book because it is unique as a memoir. So I, yeah. Do you know of
Um,
any?
so memoirs, I recently have been told that even publishers' memoirs are not really in the stream of things.
Yeah.
I kind of have a memoir because it's a story of my life. My book is called Strong Women Cry Too. It's a book and Bible study where I wrote the story of my life and about heartache in my life. And the second half of the book teaches on 20 character traits of a strong woman. And I infiltrate two character traits in each chapter. So, like if I'm talking about, I don't know, having an optimistic attitude and um, gosh, my brain just went blank, but uh, uh, being steadfast, let's say. I incorporate things into my chapter that have those qualities, and then I give a questionnaire at the end. And then in my Bible study, we talk about those character traits. Mine is a memoir with a unique twist to it. But meeting with agents and editors and publishers, they didn't want a memoir.
Yeah.
So I ended up self publishing. But um, she would really just have to enter it into a competition as a nonfiction.
Okay.
That's what she probably will have to do and see what kind of feedback she gets from it there.
Yeah.
That's what I would suggest.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, if you want to stop sharing your screen, and then did I miss any questions or comments, Brandy, Melissa, if either of you saw something that I might not have talked about, or if
I
anybody has a question.
just the question of what contest was it that you facilitate again?
The one I do is called the Florida Tapestry Awards. Yeah,
Thank
just like
you.
the email, the Gmail,
Yeah.
the Florida Tapestry, and we do it every competition opens December 15th generally, and you can submit through the end of January. And then the judges have to have their feedback by the end of February, and then we announce winners mid-March. That's how
Thank you.
that one works. Yeah, we do have a Facebook page as well. You can find information on that, the Florida Tapestry Awards Facebook page. And we have a website, but that's wordweaversorlando.com. And the tapestry page is on there as well.
Now, if somebody is looking to offer themselves as a judge, what would you recommend for how they go about doing that or finding places that need judges?
Well, we had kind of talked about that, and a lot of times it just happens by referral, number one. Number two, um, you can go onto group chats like the Pen, and I can't think, I know there's other editing pages. If you go onto Facebook and find some different editing pages, the Christian Pen, I think, is another. I don't know if the Pen is the Christian Pen. I'm not an editor, so I don't
Yeah,
know.
Christian Penn is the Christian Proofreaders and Editors Network.
Yes, I think it
Okay.
is.
So groups like that, you can put a call out on that and just say, hey, does anyone know? Because those are the people who will know who's looking for judges. Like I probably have about, I don't know, I want to say maybe 75 judges on my list. And usually I'll get about 30 that will agree to judge just because of circumstances. And and then I usually always get maybe an additional 4 or 5 that someone will refer people to our contest. So I know that's probably not much of a help, but you really need to go to like some editing groups. They would know.
So I can kind of infer that On the flip side, if you are facilitating a contest and you need judges and don't have judges, you can go to these groups or these organizations and say, hey, I'm looking for judges and ask them to put a call out for you.
Yes, you can do that. I don't. I go to my judges.
Okay.
No, and
Well, I'm,
like,
I'm just thinking
because
like if somebody is starting and they don't have a lot of judges,
oh, I gotcha. Yes, you're
yeah.
right. Yes, you could go there and just put a call out for judges and say, I'm starting a new contest. Yeah. And you need to make sure they know that it is volunteer. Ours is volunteer. So I don't know if there's other contests that pay their judges. I don't know
From
if
what
there's
I
other
understand, there
contests
are
that,
some, but maybe
yeah,
not necessarily in the Christian sphere, more outside.
right. Um, and the other thing is there are some contests where there are two or three judges that read everything that comes in. So that's not how we work. But
Um,
and our participants, they get a copy of the scored rubric. That's where our contest is a little different. We actually send them the scored rubric from the judge.
well,
But
we
you're
did
right.
have some, yeah, there were some comments that people like getting comments that they prefer those kinds of contests so that they know why instead of just guessing why did I get such a
Yes.
medium score or bad score or high score, then they've got an idea, at least they know.
And
Yeah.
that's why I'm changing on my rules. I think that you can't just give a five. You have to say what was so great about it that you gave a five. Why is it ready for publishing?
Yeah.
Because otherwise you might need to give it a 4.5 or, or something else. I really get frustrated at judges that just give straight fives all the way down. It really irritates me, especially when other judges don't give a straight five. If someone's going to get a straight five, which is the highest, other judges should be doing the same thing if it's such a great piece, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you
Anyone
definitely
else?
don't want them doing that just so they can avoid having to write anything. Yeah,
Right. Right.
right.
Right. Because of their time constraints or whatever. It's just
Yeah.
like be honest up front. Just be upfront. And, I mean, I feel bad when I put the call out and say, oh, I'm sorry. Can you help me do one more?
Yeah.
I feel bad to even ask that, but I'm like in a pinch. And listen, I've got 60 people I can call. It's not like you have to take it. I try to find the people that do a good job of judging more so to help with the tiebreaker or with something else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so if you're coming from the point of view of a writer, did you all learn anything about how you can write better when you enter a competition?
Mm,
Pay attention
I mean,
to the focus and goal of the competition and what they're looking for in a winner.
absolutely.
yes, and the guidelines. They are
Absolutely.
so important. I will get people that'll send me, so clearly states, send me 2 Word documents. One is your cover sheet that has all your personal information, and one is your document that includes your synopsis or paragraph or whatever your guidelines say and your first 1,500 words. I don't think that could be written any more clear. And inevitably, one or two people will always mess it up. I used to, ashamedly, I used to say, don't worry, I'll put your synopsis on the thing. I don't do it anymore. Now, if they do it wrong, I just send it back to them and say, you need to do it per the guidelines. This is incorrect.
Yeah.
I don't even tell them what they did wrong. I just say, please reread the guidelines. This is incorrect. It is not submittable. And I don't even want to have to do that. I would rather submit it and then the judge deduct them 3 points for not having a synopsis. I don't care. I mean,
Yeah.
hey, that's how you learn. This is publishers are expecting certain things, and they got way too many things coming in for them to not have it right. You're showing them that you don't take pride in what you're doing. You don't really care to read the rules, whatever.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. Writers' guidelines are there to help writers succeed. Why would you ignore them and not
Exactly.
follow the guidelines?
Right.
Don't do that. Follow the guidelines.
Right.
Every publisher wants you to follow the guidelines.
Very good.
And
Well
Norma
spoken.
would be right here saying, yes, yes,
She
yes,
would.
follow the guidelines.
Pam
Yes.
is saying, preach, Julie. So a lot of supporters here.
They're a recipe for success. If you don't follow those, it's an immediate chop off, and you're not even going to get it read if you don't follow the guidelines. So
Yeah,
follow the
yeah.
guidelines. Yes.
And see, so I don't know how many of you are familiar with Word Weavers International. Um, how many of you know? Are you familiar or no?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Okay, so they are. So that's the great thing I love about Word Weavers International is that our critique groups, you can't defend your writing when you're sitting in a group.
Right.
You can't get mad at something negative, and it all goes back to the reading style of people. And once you understand that, you are more open to hearing the feedback from a writer, I mean, from a reader who wants to hear your knowledge, as opposed to a reader who wants to hear your story. When I was writing my book, people would say, "Oh, I love your voice." And I'm thinking, I don't even know what you're talking about, but I had to like figure it out and look it up. And then I realized, oh, it's like when I'm telling my stories and they like to hear the description or whatever. But if you start writing and reading things from all four of those different reading styles, wow, it just opens up a whole new world, you know? Any
Yeah.
other questions?
I didn't see any others. Did you guys?
Nope.
Okay. Why don't we, well, it's getting close to an hour. So, Brandy, do you want to talk about next week?
Sure.
Right with
Next
us?
week, we're having a come right with a session, and we are going to be doing it with a holiday theme. Why? Because when it is the holidays, it is not time to write for the holidays. The time to write for the holidays is 6 to 9 months before the holidays, if not a year ahead of time. So, our Come Write With Us prompts are going to be holiday focused, and they might not be the holiday you expect. So, join us and find out what we're going to do.
We never know for sure what Brandy's going to be up to. So here we go. You have to kind of figure it out. So I'm going to close, but please, everybody, stay around for the after party, and then we'll invite you guys on. So, you can stop your videos then. If you're watching the replay, we thank you for doing that, and we thank you for, well, just thank you for doing that and invite you to join our Facebook Writers Chat group. Check out our Writers Chat Facebook page where you can see all of our videos, which are on YouTube, on our own channel. So, of course, you can also go there, the Writers Chat channel. We meet every Tuesday morning at 11 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Central. You can go around the globe to find your time zone, and we would love to have you join us to be here live when we do our writing sessions or when we have a very special guest like Julie. Julie, thank you so much. It has always been a pleasure for me to be a judge with Florida Tapestry. And I think you do a professional job. It's very great. Love the rubric. So thank you for what
Thank
you do
you.
for writers because that's a big job. And it's all volunteer. So, kudos to you and to other people who organize those kinds of contests and make sure that they are run fairly and with integrity. So until next week, everybody, we'll see you then. And again, stay here for the after party. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.